Happy New Year, She 2.0 listeners, and Jackie.
Happy New Year, Ramona, and everyone listening today.
I know it's probably a few weeks in by the time our listeners are hearing our first podcast of 2021. But I did want to say Happy New Year because we haven't talked to anybody or they haven't heard our voices in a little while.
It's been kind of a crazy time, and with everybody, like anyone with kids has been in lockdown because they're working from home, doing everything from home, and now homeschooling, right? Just like you and I. So it's been a bit of a comedy of errors, but we're back.
We're back, and I'm kind of excited about our first guest of the year because, one of the things that you and I have always talked about is how ill-prepared we felt when going through menopause or perimenopause, and the lack of information, and the whole reason why we started She 2.0 is that we want to fill in that gap, right? And we've had many experts and health professionals that come on to inform us, but we thought it was really important to hear from real women going through this because each of our experiences are different, both physically, emotionally, and it's really important for us to share our experiences with each other so we can learn from each other. And so we had one brave gal come on for our first Real Woman podcast. So Jack, do you want to let our listeners know who came to join us?
Yeah, well, we like to say she's the first woman ever in the world to go through perimenopause. But what we really mean is she's the first woman to come forward and openly chat about it. Sharon DeVellis, who's also willing to donate her first and last name, in an atmosphere where people are a little bit reticent to talk about this topic. Sharon is a writer. She's a mom. She's a wife. She's so physically active and outgoing, and she was, really sideswiped by menopause or perimenopausal symptoms that she's going through. And she joins us on this episode to talk about how it's impacted her life, the things she thought she knew she didn't, and some things she's tried that have worked and some that haven't. But just more importantly, she's this great authentic voice that's sharing her story about her whole experience. And I think, as we all listen to it, we're all going to be doing a lot of head nodding as we agree with her on the challenges and the struggles and what we go through on this particular part of our journey.
Yeah. I have to thank Sharon because hopefully she'll listen to this when it's posted because I think it's really great that she was brave enough to share her experiences. But I also learned a lot from her. We can all learn from each other, right? There's things that she's tried, particularly with the jasmine oil, spoiler alert, that, I might try to see if it helps. So I hope you guys enjoy our first Real Woman podcast with Sharon. Enjoy.
Hey, Sharon, it's so great that you're joining Ramona and I on She 2.0, the podcast. You are our first real woman with a real woman story about your menopausal experience or perimenopause. So welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Yay, welcome.
I'm super excited to be here. I didn't know I was going to be the first one, but yay me. I'm happy to talk about this and kind of open the floodgates, for lack of a better phrase, of information and help women feel normal.
About something that is normal, right?
Yeah, completely.
It's crazy that we even have to say that, but it's a fact, right? We feel like this is not an easy conversation to have with our family or peers, and I'm really happy that you're so open to having this conversation with us. So, Sharon, where are you in the whole journey? Shall we call it? Are you currently perimenopausal? Are you postmenopausal? Are you what's happening?
So I'm perimenopausal. I was trying to think back, I was really I'm when did it all actually happen? So I'm 51 now, and I have to say probably it was in 2018 it really started for me. And then I went from about April to November with no period whatsoever. And I was like, yay me, this is awesome. And I had no nothing else. I mean, my anxiety was higher and I was having trouble sleeping, but other than that, it was completely fine. And then the day I went on a cruise, my aunt took my sister and I on a cruise. I got my period and it didn't stop for 31 days.
Oh my God.
What?
So
That's
that
punishment.
was, so that was, and I got back and I started a new job like 5 days after I got back from the cruise. So then I was dealing with all of this too. And it wasn't pretty. Like, if you're our age range, I want you to think of like the elevator scene in The Shining, like horrifying, horrifying. So then that happened and then it ended. And then that brought me into 2019. And it was like a semi-normal year. And then again, I went like 6 months and I was like, okay, this is it. This is it. We're going to get in there now. I'm going to be super happy. And no, it came back. And then again this past summer. But then this past summer, when it happened, I started getting hot flashes too. And so,
Okay.
yeah,
The
so
pits.
sometimes those, so it's really interesting. Like, I know some people have them for long periods of times. Mine were fast and furious, but without the movie box office. And and sometimes I would have like 5 to 7 in an hour, and they would just come on and be like super quick and super hot and then just go away. So that was a whole other thing to deal with, especially this summer of July when it was really hot.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, it was really interesting, maybe the word, I don't know. Uncomfortable, embarrassing because my face would go so red. And then my period came back again. So that's where I'm at.
So the first time when you lost your period for like 6 months and then you had the 30-day experience, did you then after that have regular periods like monthly, and then you went again another 6 months
Yeah,
without
so
one?
they were pretty regular. Yeah,
Okay.
like not sporadic or anything. Like, they came back and they
Okay.
were the typical. I've never been, I will be the first to admit, I've never been one who really actively kept track, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, when you're expecting them, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, it's around this time, and it would come and that was fine. So yeah, it just went back to normal.
Yeah.
And during this time, particularly around the time where you went so many days with your period, was the blood flow consistently heavy?
Oh yeah.
Or
Yeah, it was horrifying. Like, it was
and
just
did you
like,
follow up with your doctor at all during this time? Just kind of ride it out.
I just wrote out, I'm feeling fine. I mean, gross,
Mm-hmm.
but fine. And just, had it gone on longer,
Mm-hmm.
for sure I would have, but it didn't seem to, in my head, I was like, well, I guess this is like 6 or 7 months worth of like
Yeah.
lining I have to get rid of.
Yeah, I
So,
suppose. Yeah.
like in my head, I was like,
Yeah.
this seems pretty normal.
So, do you mind me asking, from the time when you first started experiencing perimenopause in terms of like losing your period, how old you were at that time? Because a lot of our listeners are of varying ages, and one point we're trying to get across is like, it it happens at any age. Like, gone are the days where you see these ads of like women in their 60s who are in menopause, which seems to be like the narrative a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that Jack and I have always tried to get across in our messaging is that a lot of us are still very young, vibrant women that are going through this. We're not, geriatric just yet. Sometimes I might feel like it, but I'm not. So we always like to, if you don't mind talking a little bit about your age range and when it started to now and that sort of thing.
Yeah, sure, is 48.
Okay.
So, and you're talking to like a very active 48-year-old. So I,
Yeah.
coach speed skating. I was racing in triathlons. I run 10Ks, like very active, like
Mm-hmm.
certainly not geriatric whatsoever.
Yeah. And 48 is, fairly young when you think about sometimes the typical age range that's associated with menopause is like, if I think of like traditional advertising, it's like, late, like early 50s sort of scenario, right? So, but for many of us, it's happening sometimes in our late 30s.
Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like the symptoms can, I know some people, I won't bust them on the podcast, but who started experiencing symptoms like before early 40s, and it carried on for a good 5 years before she actually really, really went into perimenopause and started getting physical, like no periods.
So there is evidence to show that perimenopause can typically, this is what I read, happen around 35. But in the very beginning of perimenopause, from our understanding, some of the hormones that you lose are not, it's not estrogen, so it's not as noticeable. So you may not even notice it. There may be no change to your period. There may be no mood swings, no hot flashes, but your body is starting to drop levels of a certain hormone. And I think it could be progesterone, which is so deceiving, right? Because then you think you get a period every month, you can get pregnant, no problem. But like if someone like me found out, that is not the case at all. Like can cause a lot of fertility issues. And it's so confusing, the information, because you don't realize that it's a perimenopausal issue. You think it's a fertility issue or I'm too stressed or whatever. But did your OB-GYN or your doctor, your GP, like help you understand this at all? Or is this something you had to figure out on your own? Like who told you?
Yeah, I just kind of figured it out on my own. I mean, my doctor and I have a great relationship. I've been seeing like for 19 years. She's really open. But I didn't really talk to her about it. I'm more just a matter of fact person. But now looking back, I do wish I'd like spoken with her more, because I feel like in my early 40s leading up to this, my anxiety definitely increased throughout those years. And I wonder if that was an underlying effect of going into perimenopause, to the point, and I'm very open about that too, my anxiety, but even my boys are like, we don't ever remember you being like this, like when we were younger. And I'm like, I don't think I was. So anxiety was definitely an issue. And it's more that hindsight gives you 20/20 vision, where now I'm like, oh yeah, I probably should have talked to her about this, but it just happens so gradually.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
all of a sudden one day you're kind of like, oh yeah, I have full-blown anxiety now.
But it's
Yeah.
also like not part of the conversation a lot of the time, Sharon. So I
Mhm.
think, and again, that's sort of what we're trying to do here is there's a lot of us, even myself, and I think Jack included, like, didn't like, I mean, I knew I would be going into menopause because I was forced to be in menopause, but I didn't understand what was about to happen to my body and how long the process would take. Um, and all of the different symptoms and side effects that you get. Anxiety is one of them. So a lot of us who would be going through it naturally could be suffering for years and years and not knowing it and not even thinking like, I should really talk to my doctor about this because I'm feeling different, but it's not anything like earth shattering for
Mhm.
some of us. So we don't think to talk about it, which is why we kind of wanted to open up the conversation about it, just to educate each other more, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because there's all these books on puberty, right? Like you go into a
Mm-hmm.
bookstore and your little girl's gonna hit puberty, and there's like hundreds of books to choose from, but yeah, there's no real like menopause handbook.
No, there's
Absolutely.
not. And I feel like one of the complaints that I have, it's multi-directional, the blame on this one, but I blame the healthcare system, I blame media, and I blame women in general, because um, we are sort of trained to downplay our period,
Hmm.
our reproductive system, and menopause and perimenopause. Like people don't want to hear about it. Doctors, GPs, they're gatekeepers, but they don't have the experience to talk to us about it, or, you know, where they should be sending us to experts, but we have to do our own digging to find the experts. So they don't seem to have a roster of experts to send us to for different symptoms. And, you know, the media, you know, if you look at anything to do with menopause, it's very negative. And we've seen some negative connotations around our periods. And like, I know that we were all decades ago when we got our first period, but, you know, remember those stupid ads about the microfiche, and she was a spy, and that's how she got her little maxi pad around town. Like, why are we so embarrassed about it? And then we wonder why now no one wants to talk about it. I mean, we're just innately trained that this is not a topic for the dinner table.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And I will say I am part of the problem, because I make jokes about it, which I mean, I do because, you know, kind of you have to deal with it.
You have to have levity
like
during this.
You have to deal with a 31-day period, so you might as well laugh at it. But, you know, I think it really does downplay what we're going through, and the seriousness of, and the you know, the lack of sleep that so many of us go through. Like, I jokingly put out on Twitter one day, I'm like, you know, menopausal women should take over the world because we're all up between 1 and 3. We just need to text each other.
It's back to breastfeeding.
People, right? Like, and people are like, oh yeah, I'm always up. Like, I wake up and I can't fall back to sleep. And it's a huge problem. So a health problem as well, because so many of us are walking around sleep deprived, which is one of the worst things you can do for your health.
Well, and it contributes to anxiety and depression when you're not getting sleep, right? So there is a vicious cycle there. So along with like hot flashes and anxiety, was there any other side effects that were kind of dogging you or are still dogging you right now?
So definitely lack of sleep was one of them, but I found a few answers that have worked for me. So there's definitely a period of about a year where I would wake up anywhere from like 1 a.m. to 2 a.m. and be awake, you know, for a good couple of hours during the middle of the night. And then I don't think being in a pandemic helped that, and being in lockdown as well. So, but definitely like the sleep was a big issue, and it really affected other aspects of my life in terms of working out and movement, because I'm tired. And then when you're tired, I think you also make bad food choices, right?
Absolutely.
It's almost like when you're hungover and you're like, I need a greasy burger. And so you're sleep deprived and you're just like, you know, grabbing things that aren't necessarily nourishing for your body. And it's this cycle, which is not good.
You want carbs.
You totally want carbs. And carbs are not evil, like they aren't, but when you're eating like white bread carbs all the time, that's a little bit evil.
The comfort carbs. Yeah, they're not the best.
So, you know, that was probably, and then that also leads to weight gain. And, you know, so will say I hadn't had any problem with weight gain until COVID. So I think it's more COVID related than.
Yeah, the COVID 19 pounds, right?
Oh, it's the real thing.
It's like the freshman 10 or 15 or whatever the hell that was.
The quarantine 15.
Yeah, I've definitely got the 15 going right now, unfortunately. So what have you been doing to help mitigate some of these symptoms? What has worked for you and what hasn't?
Yeah, so definitely movement. I mean, I'm big into not necessarily like fitness and health, but my philosophy is about movement every day. So getting out, I have a dog, which I walk like 3 times a day. You know, that gets me out for like 8 to 10 kilometers a day. So even on the days where maybe I'm not working out, I'm still getting out and moving. And I think that's really important for women. If not, especially, you know, go to the gym 3 days a week, but then those other 4 days a week, you still need to be moving your body. So that was one thing that's really helped me. The other thing that I've just discovered recently, which has been a game changer for my sleep, is sleeping with my window open. I read some articles on sleeping in a colder room.
Mm-hmm.
how it's supposed to be better for you. And for me, it's worked. Like now I still wake up in the middle of the night, but I fall back to sleep. It's weird.
It works
Oh,
for
the fresh
babies.
air. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's more than the fresh, it's the cold
The cold.
actually.
Mhm.
So they say like a room temperature of about 66 degrees
Mm-hmm.
works for helping you go back to sleep, and it's worked wonders for me.
So
Awesome.
I sleep with the window wide open and the
Yeah,
ceiling fan on, and I sleep in a tank top, and I find it hot as hell in here. And my husband has actually taken to sleeping in my daughter's room,
nothing
and
wrong
my
with that.
daughter wears some cosplay onesie that's all fleece. So she sleeps with me, and she's totally fine. But yeah,
That's
like
awesome. Yeah.
I was hoping that you would tell me something I wasn't already doing.
But I do have some other things. So another thing that really worked for me was um, jasmine oil, which sounds so weird because
Mm.
everyone's always lavender or whatever. And
Mhm.
I stumbled across this study, and I'm not a scientist. I'm just saying it worked for me.
Yeah, we just like
It,
sharing what
yeah,
others have
so
tried,
I'm like,
right?
Yeah.
Like,
whatever. But it was this study, and it was jasmine oil, which reminds me obviously of my grandmother, like that flowery scent.
mhm.
And they had tested it on mice, and when these mice were exposed to this jasmine oil, they just went and chilled out in the corner of their cage. Like it was almost like taking like Valium to them. It hit those parts of the brain. So I actually kept jasmine oil beside my bed, and in
Mhm.
the middle of the night when I would wake up, I would smell it, and it did help me fall back to sleep. Like not instantaneously, but it would take like 2 hours down to about half an hour.
Oh,
So that was a
nice.
really good one.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, there
And
is
I
something to
always
be
use,
said.
oh, sorry, I was just going to say, I always use Lush's Sleepy Cream, and it does have lavender and some other things. I think
mm,
calendula or something
yeah,
like that.
everybody thinks like lavender, right? And
Yeah.
I just personally don't like the smell of it, but I don't really like the smell of the jasmine, but it worked. And then the last thing was acceptance. Instead of trying specifically for sleeping and waking up in the middle of the night, instead of just trying to fight it and being really upset and anxious, like, oh, it's happening again, I'm awake again, like, oh, I just would accept it, and I would just maybe turn on my light and read for a bit, or scroll my phone, which I know you're not supposed to do because of like blue light or whatever. And I would just be like, okay, well, I'm awake right now. So what can I do at this time instead of trying to force myself to sleep and feeling frustrated? And I think
Hmm.
that's been the biggest thing, as even with the hot flashes. Like at first when it was happening, I was like, oh my God, why is this happening so much and so frequently? And then after I'm just like, oh, just accept it. Like you can't change it.
No.
This is happening, it's going to happen. And so they'd come on, I'd be like, oh, okay, it's another one, and then just get on with it. And so I don't know, just the acceptance, like this is my body and I can either fight it or I can work with it, has
Mhm.
been the biggest game changer for me. Not that I accomplish it every single time. like,
Of
like
No.
there's
course,
times
but it's
where I'm
worth a
like,
shot.
oh my gosh, stop
Well,
it. But
sometimes it can be overwhelming. Like a certain
yeah,
symptom can be overwhelming, anxiety or a
totally.
hot flash or a night sweat. And I think it's I think it's about accepting it, but I also think like we've looked into so much different research and experts about there's a lot of stuff too that it could be indicative of. Like when we talked to Susan Schroeder, nutritionist, we talked about not hot flashes. They seem to be an anomaly that no one can figure out. I don't care what anybody says, nobody can figure out the hot flashes, but other things, anxiety and everything else, like if we understand what our adrenal glands are doing at 3 a.m., why they're waking us up, we can deal with that.
Hmm.
Either through a supplement, a rebalancing, and we know like other symptoms like, you know, peeing our pants. There's pelvic floor therapy. Like there are things that we don't have to suffer through, but there are certain symptoms of menopause where I really just like Ramona. I don't know if you agree. I haven't read anything where anyone claims to be able to figure out hot flashes, where they come from and why, and how to deal with them. That seems to be like the one symptom, and it's the most bothersome symptom to me, but it seems to be
Mhm.
the one that no one can really understand what's happening. Like, There's theories.
Yeah. I haven't found anything either. I mean, I'll be honest to say I'm one of the lucky ones in that I wasn't really plagued with hot flashes so much, although
Mm-hmm.
I notice them, and we've talked about this on previous podcasts now through a pandemic when I'm not exercising as much and I may be drinking a bit more wine and that sort of thing, that they're starting to come up again more frequently, which is unusual for me. So that's a sort of a sign for me, like something in my diet and what I'm doing to my body is not doing well. And
Yeah.
and everything's falling apart, you know? But that's when I usually experience the hot flashes right now.
Yeah, I would say the most disappointing thing about perimenopause is that wine does increase hot flashes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And spicy
Totally.
foods.
I go,
Alcohol,
oh,
yeah.
come on, you have to punish me more. But
I know.
yeah, it
You're like,
really
isn't
does.
this the only thing getting me through it?
Wouldn't it be amazing if wine actually
Helps
they
it.
like that was like the one thing that the doctor said, you know what, you need to drink more wine and
Oh,
it'll
Yeah.
really help with these side effects and it's totally healthy.
Wine will clear the brain fog. You will lose weight, sleep better. It adds
yeah.
collagen to your skin, and it gets rid of hot flashes. I'd be all over that.
And let's actually just talk about the brain fog for a minute, because that's a real thing. And that's another, I'm glad you brought it up, because, the nouns go first. Like you
Oh
forget,
my
you're like,
God.
can you please pass that thing on the table filled with salt? And my son's like, the salt shaker? I'm like, yeah, that. Like you just simple everyday words and you're
Mm-hmm.
struggling to find them, or you had a thought in your head and then it's just gone like a
Gone.
wisp of air. Like you're just like in the middle of a sentence and you can't remember. I'm surprised we're all having a coherent conversation right now.
No, we have notes. We're following the notes, and I'm recording this.
Yeah.
The brain fog thing I love bringing up. It's like probably my one favorite menopause symptom that I like to chat about, because I think a lot of women get really scared when it starts happening to them. And I know for me, because my mother has dementia, it was like a whole other level of like, oh my God, I'm getting dementia. And I've been part of studies with the University of Toronto to learn more about how menopause affects your cognition. And I hope to have them, or we hope to have them on as a guest in the future
Yeah.
this year. But it is a really, really important side effect that I love bringing up. So I'm glad that you brought it up again, because it's really important for women to know this is a big one. It maybe doesn't happen to everybody, but it usually happens for a certain time, longer than others, and it can be really unsettling if you don't know that it's
Yeah,
coming.
and like you mentioned, especially if you have somebody in the family who's had dementia or Alzheimer's, and right away that's where your mind goes to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the brain fog is pretty common, right? And whether women get a severe case of it or a minor case of it, it's still enough to make you take pause and be concerned, right? Like we joke about it, it's funny, but like when you're pregnant, you get baby brain, but it goes away.
Mm-hmm.
When you get menopause, we don't know if it goes away. I don't know if it goes away. Like I don't think I've heard whether or not it goes away or not. And so I do Scrabble. I'm trying to do Sudoku, but it feels too much like math. Like anything, like anything to keep my brain sharp, even though I would say all of us homeschooling children, running a business, and dealing with life and marriage and everything else, our brains should be pretty damn sharp by now, but somehow it just doesn't feel enough.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. You say we laugh about it, and we're laughing and we're making jokes about it, but we're stuffing down our real fear, and that doing ourselves and every woman a disservice by doing that and not saying, you know what, I'm actually really concerned that, this could be something else, or that this is never going to go away, and this is my brain from here on out. So I think it's super important to, like joke about it again, but you have to kind of make light of it, but not all the time. Like we need to be able to express that we're afraid.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
it's a good point. Is this the new baseline from my memory?
Yeah.
Like this spotty kind of cognition, which sucks. And there are ways, like I write notes for myself. I write to-do lists like crazy. I have about 65 to-do lists at any given time. One is for the house, one is for work, one's for She 2.0, because I know that if I don't do that, I will forget. I have a
Yeah.
notebook beside my bed now because we're getting a new puppy on Saturday. I'm like, oh my God, we have mouse traps out. Like, we have to get rid of the mouse traps. And then I wake up in the morning and I'm like, what do we have to get rid of? Something about the dog and danger. Oh, well, it's gone.
Also,
Oh,
the additional thing that's added on is the mom's mental load.
Yeah.
So
of
we
course.
have the mental load, and now we have a foggy brain, and we're living and dying by our task lists, and the pressure is immense.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I hate to
And
be
you
a Debbie
add,
Downer, but
yeah, but you
it's a
layer on a
lot.
pandemic as well, and trauma also contributes to memory loss.
Oh,
And
great.
so you think of that when we couple that with menopause and our task list and whatever, it's like, no wonder some of us feel like we're just unraveling, right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
The other thing I find really tough with menopause, and not everybody gets it, this symptom, but the mood swing and the hormone rage. I feel like you can explain that away to your partner, to your kids, all you want, but it's sort of like the fool me once, shame on you. Like, I feel like it wears out its welcome as an excuse, but it's not an excuse. Like, it shouldn't be categorized with all the other lame ass excuses we use for life. Like, I can only yell at my husband so many times and be like, oh, sorry, I didn't know where that came from, before it becomes like, can you not get a grip on that? And that can cause friction in your relationship with your husband, with your kids, with work colleague, like with whoever, right? Like,
Yeah.
one of the big challenges is the people around you not understanding what you're going through. And that's sorry to switch gears here, but that's a big topic for me, because I think that's a twofold problem. There's the lack of understanding, which can create a lack of empathy, but there's also the people around you who don't want to talk about it, like, who don't feel comfortable talking to you about it.
So I'm gonna the unpopular opinion here, but
Good.
I think we have to take responsibility for our own emotions, and we're grown women, and so when we start to recognize that we're feeling this rage is the exact moment when we need to take a step back um, before we say anything and try to understand where it's coming from.
Yep.
Um, so that we're not, I think we tend to do it with, our husbands and our kids, right? It's almost the exact same way as a toddler will have a tantrum in front of his mom because
Yep.
he knows it's a safe place to land and his mom will always love him. And so, because we certainly wouldn't have the same sort of outburst with a stranger at the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because
Yeah.
even if we're feeling rage because somebody is slow walking in front of us at the mall, we wouldn't go off the handle at that person
Mm-hmm.
like we would at our husband for chewing with his mouth open. So,
Yes. Yeah. I
It's
wish we
right?
could,
So
but I
I
wouldn't.
think we have to take some responsibility. Yes, it's awful. I felt the rage, and my kids have seen it, especially when I'm driving. I don't know what it is that sets me off as I'm driving, but
Road rage.
and I'm like,
Yeah.
seriously, and I never used to be like that. And I'm like swearing and like, oh, um, and so they've seen it, and it does come from like a hormone-based place in my body, but I also have to take responsibility for it and be like, you need to not explode at people you love.
Yeah.
Have you found that going through this right now has affected any of your personal relationships, whether it be family, friends?
Um, No, not, I mean, again, like this is such a bad time to be going through because I'm like, is it
Mm-hmm.
COVID or is it menopause? I
Yeah.
don't
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, but I would say no. Like, I'm pretty good. I meditate like shit. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I am meditating. I do walking meditations. I wake up in the morning. I do a loving kindness meditation. Like, and I'm really into just when I'm in that moment where I'm going to snap. My husband's nickname for me used to be Twig because I would just snap, right? As I got more mature and hopefully, I learned to just breathe it in for a second and be like, what are you really upset at? Is it
Mm-hmm.
really him or are you just like a ball of hormones right now? A lot of
Hmm.
times it was a ball of hormones
Or lack
What,
thereof.
or lack
yeah.
thereof. Yeah.
Was there anything that surprised you about menopause or what you've been experiencing that you didn't know?
So I didn't really like, so my mom passed away when I was like 20 years ago. So when I was quite young, and I never really got to talk to her about her experience. Same with my grandmothers. Like I didn't have a lot of women around. So I don't think anything has surprised me because I didn't know what to expect, except what I
Mm-hmm.
see in the media,
Mm-hmm.
or joking around with my friends. But really, like, it's like, oh, you're going to get hot flashes. Oh, you're going to be cranky. Oh, you're not going to sleep. And that's all I really knew. So I don't think anything surprised me. I'm trying really hard to
Mm-hmm.
just take it in stride.
Mm-hmm.
It's very caricaturable in the media and in
Hmm.
film and television. You can laugh at another woman being a bit cranky and snappy and think, oh, when I do that, it'll be fleeting. It's not fleeting.
No, it's
And
like I'm
it's,
going on 3 years now. It's not fleeting at
yeah,
all.
but it's cumulative. Like you feel like, fuck, am I just like the most negative person in Canada or what's
Yeah.
happening here? And it can really play on your psyche. I think that's kind of the danger. And then you throw in a pandemic that's already playing on your psyche. It's a big problem.
I would say too, and I mean the physical aspect of it, I'm like losing collagen in my skin and
Ah, that
Mm-hmm.
like
sucks.
just like things that I can't control. Like if I want to control my weight, I can eat better and, exercise and lift weights, but I can't control the saggy, doughy cheeks I'm getting, or like the under, like the waddle on my chin, like, and just losing
Yes.
the elasticity of my skin and all of these things, my lips getting thinner, and like my hairline I've noticed is starting to get a little thinner, like all of these things which are, and again, I don't know, is it menopause or is it just normal aging or is it a combination of both? But those things that I can't control, I find bothersome sometimes.
Well, the thing about that is, it when you talk about women, I think you have to tie menopause and aging together because women will always go through menopause, right? Like
Hmm.
it's you can't not, and unless for some weird reason you were born without a uterus, men don't go through that. They do go through slight loss of whatever the testosterone. They can get a shot in the ass, and 10 seconds later they're in their 20s. But we can't go through that. Like
Yeah.
it's part of our aging process. It's directly linked to aging, menopause, and collagen we lose because we lose estrogen and all the things we know about what is being depleted in our bodies. So unless you're doing like maybe HRT, and I don't know enough about HRT to say this, but I'm just sort of saying like there's no real coming back from this. Yeah, no, like
That's
when
so
you go through it,
depressing.
you're going through it. And
Yeah.
I think we have to find a new way to look at it because I feel like, I don't know, do we get rid of our mirrors? Because it is terrible to look at yourself physically and berate yourself for something out of your control, something you don't want any other person to judge you on. So why should we judge ourselves on this, right? And
The one,
Sharon, I've only known you a few years, and it's a Zoom call, but pretty good video on your end, my friend. You look great.
oh,
Like
thank you.
you're keeping in shape and you look healthy and you know what I mean? Like a lot of this crap is also in our head.
So one thing I do know for sure was that in my 20s, wearing a bikini and looking in the mirror, I thought I didn't look great. And then when I was in my 30s, I looked back at my 20 pictures and was like, girl, you were beautiful. And then in my 30s, I'd be like, oh, I don't look great in this bathing suit. And oh my gosh, like I put on some weight or whatever. And then in my 40s, I looked at those pictures and was like, girl, you're beautiful once again. And so I'm trying that, right? To look
Yeah.
and be like, you're beautiful the way you are right now. And when you're 60, you're going to look back and be like, yeah, you really were beautiful.
Why didn't I cherish that?
That's right. And I think it's just, you know, it really is a result of how women are perceived in media, and we put this pressure on ourselves. And I have done the exact same thing. Sharon looked back and went, oh my God, I remember going to the clubs with my friends and being like, oh my God, I look so fat and blah, blah, blah. And looking back and going, oh my God, like you looked amazing. And I think we all look amazing, and we all, you know, do our best to be healthy and eat right and take care of our families. And we're all going to look back on this and go, you know what, regardless of how we look, like we did it. We did it all and managed to hopefully stay sane through the process. But I get you, like there's physical things that happen when you go through menopause. Like for me, because mine happened prophylactically, like I was in menopause at 39 and I'm 44 now. And I see like my eyebrows are falling out. Like I have very thin eyebrows now, which like,
why is that? Like, why do our eyebrows get thinner, but we grow hair on our toes?
It's like,
I don't understand.
They fall down to our whiskers.
Yes, yeah.
It's right. Like, it's so funny, like little things. And like the collagen, absolutely. I noticed like around my eyes, the skin is so thin now. And like the same thing, like the jowls, I'm starting to see the jowls and I'm like, oh my God.
It's that lack of control.
It's
right?
a lack of the control and lack of self-acceptance, right? Like, I think we need to be a lot more kind to ourselves.
You know what? One of the worst, like, if I ever get the money and a taser, who I want to go after first is those morons who write those, look at these celebrities then and what they look like now.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you know what they look like now? They look like someone who had a successful career and they aged 30 years. Shut up. That's what they look like now. Like, why do we...
they look like a human being.
Yeah, like, we have to make people feel ashamed for aging. You know, it's like Carrie Fisher had a really great quote that, you know, beauty is not an accomplishment. And so don't look at aging like it's a fault or a weakness. Like, our physical appearance is nothing. But again, we're still fighting that uphill battle, like doves trying to fight the skin we're in and look at our inner beauty. But are we there yet? Because we're still judging ourselves on the physical impact of menopause and what you can see in us and the changes in us. But really, it's going to happen. Like, we're getting older. It's supposed to happen. We're supposed to do this. So while we can fight the uncomfortableness of some of those symptoms and we can check our bodies and make sure, okay, we might still go through symptoms, but let's make sure our bodies are functioning optimally. That should be our biggest concern, right? Like, I'm pretty sure I got a 9-year-old in the bathtub screaming at me. I'm pretty sure she doesn't care that I have jowls. I think she just cares that I play around and I'm fun and I'm, you know, still dumb enough to go wear a cosplay red panda outfit out on the street with a glass of wine. That's all she cares about. She doesn't care that my eyebrows are now my whiskers and my boobs are now my knees. You know, and I think we should have that expectation of ourselves. And I think we all have to go easier. I have one last question. Did anyone in your sort of circle or your relationship circle and family, whatever, react negatively to you talking about menopause? Like, have you ever felt around anybody in your group that you can't talk about it?
No, or maybe I'm just clueless and I don't read the signs, but I mean, I do just talk, and I will talk to my boys about it. I mean, not all the time, they're teenage boys, but I'll make comments. I'll be like, can you like just leave me alone? Just on my period after 6 months, I'm having a bad day. And I'm like, okay, mom, like all stuff, and they like back out of the room very on their tiptoes. So no, like, I mean, I haven't had any kind of negativity, which I hope means I'm surrounding myself with the type of friends and family and women that I need to surround myself with, because I'd be horrified if like someone was like, oh, you can't talk about that. Because it's such a normal thing.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm glad the two of you are doing this, because we need to normalize it and just talk about it so that it's not always done in a joking manner and downplaying what we're going through, and that the fear and uncomfortableness of it all is very real sometimes, and we need to express that.
Absolutely.
You're here.
Yeah. Sharon, thank you so much for joining us. That was awesome. Like, it was so great to hear it from your perspective, the ups and the downs. You have a very positive outlook on it, and you're clearly surrounded by a really great group of people. So I think that really will help your experience too.
Well, thank you for having me as the first real life menopausal woman.
She's real, people.
She's real.
Introducing Sharon, the first woman with perimenopause in the world.